Hi, I'm Jeff Provine, author of Haunted Oklahoma, and you're listening to Unfreaking Believable Podcast.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Unfreaking Believable. We invite you to pull up a chair, relax, and join in for the next 30 minutes or so as we bring you guests who will share with you the moments that made a difference in their lives. And it's all because of that one inciting incident. We believe that life is infinitely stranger than fiction, stranger than anything the mind can invent. You might even say, it's unfreaking believable.
Welcome to the podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
And I'm Jenny.
And I'm Betsy. How's everybody doing tonight?
Excited for another episode.
It has been a crazy week. We've got 3 recordings in 1 week. How about that?
Yes, we do.
It's way ahead of the curve because my summer gets so unfreaking believably busy that if I don't get ahead of the game, we may not get any more episodes done until the fall.
That's why it works out that we add them into the bank.
Exactly.
That's right. But it's, all I know is that my sound engineer hat is going to get a bit of a workout in the next couple of weeks. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm learning every time I edit. So I'm excited.
And we love and appreciate our sound engineer, Jen's beautiful work that she does.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Are you guys ready for my word of the day?
Yes, let's have your word of the day.
I chose a nice one. Some of the ones I choose are like super dark and kind of disturbing. So I chose kind of a nice one today since I don't know how disturbing our guest stories might be. Sometimes paranormal stories. Ooh, was that a spoiler? So sorry. Sometimes they are dark and sometimes they're not. So we'll see. But our word for the day is Nova Lunosis.
I know Nova Lunosis.
But can you say Nova Lunosis?
I can't pronounce most things.
Okay, so Nova Lunosis is a state of relaxation and wonderment that you might experience while gazing upon the stars.
Oh, I do like that.
Love it.
Because I do like to gaze upon the stars.
Me too. And I have a character nicknamed Nova.
Nice.
I know you do. And also we just bought a new telescope. So that's actually one of the things that inspired choosing that word.
Okay, I'm totally jealous. I want a telescope.
Yeah, we got one called a dwarf. It's about the size of a child's shoebox.
Oh, cool.
It's teeny.
Cool.
Oh, right on.
But it's supposedly really excellent. We haven't had a chance to use it yet. We bought it on the post-eclipse special.
Sweet.
Awesome.
So, sweet. I didn't even think about that be the idea.
Jenny, you got some fun facts?
I do have some fun facts. I have 3 quick ones for us today. So I'm just going to hammer them right out one after the other. So, first fun fact. Guillotine executions were still happening when Star Wars come out in 1977.
What?
Yes.
No way. You know where?
Yes. Well, actually, I believe it was in England. It might have been France, though. Don't quote me right now. It might have been France.
I want to say it is France because if I remember correctly, they were still using the guillotine in the early 80s.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
That'll be, another fun fact I'll have to look up for our listeners.
Yeah.
But I do believe it was France, and it's ridiculous. Even when you think about it back to 1977, it's like, what? Why was it still happening then? And then even into the 80s? It's crazy.
I remember going to see Star Wars at the theater in Altus, Oklahoma, which is an Air Force base town that we were stationed at. And it was like 120 degrees at night, and we had to stand in line, and the line wrapped all the way around the movie theater because they had one screen that was showing Star Wars, and we were not going to miss it.
Right on. I tell you, I saw it in 1977 at the famous Chinese theater on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Wow.
So, it was an incredible, because we were in line forever going over all that stuff, all the different stars and everything. In 1977, I think I was, 5? Maybe?
Yeah.
But it was an experience.
Yeah, it was.
You guys had much cooler childhoods than I did, apparently, because we were broke, and the only way we could afford to go see it was at a drive-in theater. So I had the tinny little speaker.
I love the drive-in.
The pew, pew, pew sounds very different
sure.
over one of those
little
speakers. Yeah,
okay. So, I saw the next 2 at the drive-in.
That's cool.
Aha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what's our next fact?
All right. Cleopatra lived closer to the time of owning her own iPhone than she did to the construction of the pyramids.
I can't wrap my brain around that.
I know it is. It's
No,
like,
I cannot.
what?
I mean, I know that Cleopatra was Greek,
Mm-hmm.
actually. Um, she was of
Yeah.
Greek descent, strangely.
Yep.
You know,
Wow.
but that still boggles
It's
my mind.
mind-boggling. It is. It's
Yeah.
mind-boggling. This one isn't as my third one isn't as mind-boggling, but it's still a fun
Mhm.
fact nonetheless. Marilyn Monroe and Queen Elizabeth were both born in the same year, and it was 1926. And I got to give a shout out to Betsy. Thank you for helping me correct that year.
I think what stood out to that was my grandfather was born in 1923, so he was 3 when they were born, and
Right
so to
on.
me that still is it's 2 lifetimes away for me. I just
Yeah.
can't wrap my brain around it.
It is. It's insane.
Yeah, those are some great fun facts.
Right on.
All right, well, are you guys ready to get started?
Yes.
All
Let's rock and
right.
roll.
So this episode is my pick, and I get to introduce our guest. Jeff Provine is an educator, creator, and publisher. He's a rural farm kid who turned into a college professor. He's the founder of the Oklahoma City Ghost Tours, and I can't wait to catch you on one of those ghost tours. I'm going to go. And also Okie Comics. He's also an author who's written books all about haunted Oklahoma, which I have my copy right here. Our listeners can't see it, but I've got my copy and I've read it. We had traveled in the same circles until we finally crossed paths at the Oklahoma Oddities Expo in Enid, Oklahoma earlier this year. And our booths were right next to each other. And I introduced myself and said, Jeff, I think we need to be friends. And so now we are. And Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here today. So tell us a little bit about yourself beyond what I just said. And tell us what classes you teach. What do you do?
Yeah, you covered it pretty well. So I teach at Oklahoma City Community College and do a lot of composition 1 and 2 classes.
Mm-hmm.
But then on top of that, I get to do some humanities classes too, like comparative religions and mythology, which are definitely up my way there. And I also put together a history of the comic book course.
Oh, that's cool.
Can I just sign up
Yes.
for all your classes, Jeff? Because like
Right.
that sounds like I don't know what degree that would be, but just sign me up for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
I finished my associate's degree at Rose State College in 2018 in emergency management, and I had to have a degree audit done, as you do.
Mhm.
And I had 3 classes that I was shy on that I didn't have to complete my degree, and one of them I needed a science with a lab, which I wanted to take meteorology because in Oklahoma that's kind of handy to know. But all of the classes were during the day. I work a day job. I just couldn't make it work. So I had to take physical geography. But then I had to take a humanities class, which I thought was weird because I thought I'd had all my humanities classes because I signed up for those first. So I took mythology, which
Very
I
cool.
loved. It was fantastic.
There you go.
But that mythology class, I can't tell you how helpful that is for an author. That was a fantastic class. I still think I'd like to come take yours because I think it would be fun.
It is always fun.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about some of your ghost tours and things that you do with those.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing these, Jeff, because I'm moving to Oklahoma this year and I'm going to be coming on them.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I got in. Well, I mean, I've always liked spooky stories and stuff. So when I did study abroad back in college in England, went on lots and lots of ghost tours.
What? Me too.
Oh, yeah. Where'd you go?
Twins. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was at the University of Hertfordshire, so just north of London. And we went to every little town has a ghost tour because, 1,000 years of dead people to talk about. And when I got back, I was wondering what ghost stories we have in Oklahoma, since, we've been around for a little while. And I figured there might be 1 or 2, and there are tons and tons and tons of stories. So initially, back to when I was an adjunct at OU, I would, after classes, go to different buildings and talk to like secretaries and janitors and folks who, are there all the time and hear what the legends are. And then 2009 turned that into a little walking tour there on campus, and that became my first nonfiction book, Campus Ghosts of Norman. So Campus and Campus Corner. And then as the research kept going, found out enough stories about Cleveland County to do Haunted Norman. And so after the book came out, the city asked me to do a little ghost tour downtown. And it's just grown from there on. So now co-wrote with paranormal investigator Tanya McCoy, Oklahoma City, Guthrie, and Shawnee, and then teamed up with Tammy Wilson to do Haunted Enid, which haunted Garfield County.
That's awesome. So one of my favorite ones that they write about in Haunted Oklahoma is actually one that I've investigated myself.
Oh,
and that's Fort Reno.
yeah.
And I spent quite a bit of time out there. My mother and I are both historians and genealogists, and she started going out there to do some volunteer work for them, and she found out about the ghost tours that they did. And so we started going with them, and it got to the point where we'd go so often that they just kind of let us kind of make sure people didn't wander off where they didn't belong. We weren't really officially like guards or anything, but we were just kind of there as the safety monitors, which is appropriate since that's what I do for a living. And so we would go out and we would do some history research for the museum there. We did some research on some of the suicides that happened, some of the famous figures that lived there. We were able to go back and trace some of that history. But on one of the tours, we were walking around the old Victorian, which I'm sure you know is it's the biggest property, the building that people lived in on the campus. And I was just I took pictures in the daylight, so I had like my baseline. And then I was going back with the group and taking pictures at night, and I clearly have a picture that looks like a face in the window. You can almost see him leaning in to go like, what are y'all doing out there? And I actually sold it to the Travel Channel, and it was on the show Ghost Adventures.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
So that's my claim to fame with my ghost hunting. That's probably one of the best ones I've got. But we had some other interesting things happen out there. I've been touched. We were in the attic at the old Victorian where there's children that apparently play, and we were doing some things to try to get the children to interact. We had balls and things for them to push around, little lights to flick on. And I actually felt like a hand run up my leg, under my pant leg. I checked to make sure it wasn't a spider or a snake, because that was my first thought. But it was definitely one of those. It was like, I'm confident that I was touched. And then we were walking around one of the other buildings, and one of the panes of glass actually got pushed out of the third floor window and barely missed my mom by inches. So we don't think they wanted us there that day. Wow. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I love, stories like that. And that's one of the reasons we brought you on the show, is because you have an unfreaking believable story, and we'd love to hear it. Are you ready to tell it?
I am, yes.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, so I like to say that I'm more of a ghost researcher or folklorist. I've tagged along on a lot of teams who have done their actual paranormal investigations, but I have a couple of problems with those. One is, to do a proper investigation, you got to be as very quiet as possible. So not movements. You want to make sure that you can document everything around you. So you have to sit very still for a long time, which is not something that I'm good at. So I'm sitting there kind of bored. And then if something starts happening, though, I'm a big scaredy cat, which is kind of weird for ghost tours to tell. But, telling stories is one thing. Being in the story is another one. So like in the barbershop downtown in Norman, there's an apartment above it where as I was standing next to the barbershop and everybody else was out on the sidewalk looking back toward me, and several people looked up and they saw the curtain move back and somebody peek out. So I didn't see it. I just saw everybody looking up, and they're like, what's going on? And I said, somebody looked out at us, which it's been closed up since the 70s. It's all just storage up there. So don't know who was looking at us, but I didn't see it. So otherwise the tour might have been canceled right there. So with all of these things going on, I have tagged along on quite a few. We've done investigations like at the old hospital on campus in Norman, which was the very first ghost story I heard about Norman, Oklahoma, which is the little boy roller skating around on the third floor of the old hospital, which is now where Arts and Sciences has all their offices. So they have lots of stories about motion sensor lights flicking on down the hallway, one after the other, like you'd expect somebody walking, but there's nobody there. Or the regular light switch just turning itself on and off, like somebody's playing with it. And the story goes that there was a little kid who was hit by a car and rushed there to the hospital to work on, but didn't make it. And so now he's up there playing with stuff for all time. So I've been up there and seen some footage and some flickering lights, and got in on couple of listening sessions and things, which I'm also very skeptical. So, if ghost radio's flipping back and forth, like there's still the outside chance that it could just be an algorithm picking up things, or maybe it's interpretation, pareidolia, all that kind of stuff.
I think skepticism is really healthy. I think you need to try to explain things scientifically first, and then what remains is what leaves sort of a sense of interest.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the old original Taps ghost hunting shows, Ghost Hunters and stuff. Like the first season when they were
Absolutely.
really scientific about it and all this, and they did the pub where they had the ghost lights, where the room would get cold and the lights would flicker on the wall, and they're like, "That's your air conditioner, dude. Like you can see the light coming on, and that's why it gets cold." That guy was so mad. So yeah, which I guess doesn't really make for good television as much as
Yeah.
just
That's why they
being
get into
Yeah.
the shows where they're jumping at every little bump in the night.
Right. But that's what made the show so good, though, I
Right,
think. And Steve Gonsalves actually just put out a book
Oh, cool.
called Life with Ghosts, and he talks about that scientific process. So, yeah, so I think it's cool that you subscribe to that same thing, because I think that makes it so much more credible.
Oh yeah, and then you can find out more about it too, like the big theater down in Texas that's supposed to have the ghost of John Wilkes Booth, which is also an Enid legend, so we can talk about that later too. But they're like, this theater was built around this time. John Wilkes Booth was supposed to be around here this time, but it doesn't line up. Like he would have headed out about a year before it was constructed, and it's famously haunted like a lot of theaters. And so Ghost Lab was up there. They got an EVP after they were asking, "Are you John Wilkes Booth?" And it goes, "No."
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, like that's very clear. And so now we can close.
I think that ghost was offended.
That's
Sounds
right.
like it.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Well, he'd probably been asked it a lot, so
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
just let it go.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite sayings that I've heard people say is when you're researching paranormal, look for the normal before you look for the para.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was just really, really clever, really brilliant. And, my characters in my book are very science minded. They want to know the truth, but they're not going to just take it on face value that, it's a ghost, or, oh, it's, Bigfoot, whatever the case may be. There's got to be some science. And my main character is often known to say that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but you have to have the data, because it's all about the data.
I agree. And which, like you were saying, that makes it more credible, because you can say, "Oh, that's a ghost," and then nothing. But once you've eliminated everything else it could be, then that leads into some very interesting things.
Right.
Right. I was just going to say, of all the places that you have been to, investigated, researched, et cetera, what would you say is probably your favorite haunted location?
So, that is actually a pretty good transition to this one. So, the Moore Lindsay House is where we have the Cleveland County Historical Society here in Norman, and long time, old spooky house. So I always ask, "Hey, you have any spooky stories?" And most of the time, people say, "No, nothing happens," or sometimes they get very awkward and say, "We're not really supposed to talk about it," which that's what had happened initially with some of the stories I was gathering early on. But then they had a change up in board of directors, and turns out people are really interested in ghosts and things. So they started marketing, and Valkyrie, one of the paranormal investigation teams, got an in there and started doing a series of fundraisers, which are pretty cool. So very active house, and so people come in and they've caught shadow figures, they've had movement detected, a couple of EVPs, and mostly they do question and answer with the dowsing rods. So, which as a skeptic, I'm like, okay, well, maybe your micro muscles and so forth. I'm still not sure what I think about dowsing rods, although there is something to it. One of my good buddies, whole family Mennonites, so very religious, don't play cards, certain types of music, so all this, but his grandfather does dowsing, and blows my mind, because like, that's magic, right? And like, no, it's just you get a sense of it. And so my favorite story about that is they were going to do some digging, and they needed the water line figured out where not to dig. And they were waiting on the guy to come out and do the surveying, and waiting. Finally, like, well, we're losing light here. So they just had him go out and douse it. And so he marked where he felt the line was going to be. And then they started digging. And about that time, the surveyors showed up and started yelling at him for not waiting and how dangerous this is and stuff. And then goes out and marks the water line, which was exactly where he had doused it.
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something to it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that. I'm not sure what I think about the dowsing rods. I want to know more about that. That's one where I don't feel like I have enough evidence. I'd like to have a little bit more data to see how that works. And yeah, I've never actually gotten to see anybody do it in person. So that's one of those I'm really interested to know a little bit more about that. So that's pretty cool that he was that accurate.
Yeah,
I'll research it and have one of the characters in my next book do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'll do all the research for you.
Yeah, I was reading the promo for your book, Secret Oklahoma City, which is a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. And there was a part of it, and I'm a genealogist and historian myself, members of the first families of Oklahoma, first families of the Twin Territories. So this one part just kind of blew my mind because I had never heard this story before. It says Oklahoma City was called a city born grown after it went from a population of a handful at Oklahoma Depot to over 10,000 on its first day. Nobody seemed to mention how the streets were laid crooked and it took 80 years or more to fix it by tearing up half of downtown, and that two rival city governments aimed guns at one another until the Supreme Court came out and determined who was actually in charge, and that was just in its first 6 months. I did not know that about Oklahoma City.
Yeah, absolutely. We should be putting that on our team.
I thought I knew our history pretty well, and it blew me away because I thought I knew our history pretty well. So, we were basically founded after the land run. I worked for a state agency for 28 years that was founded with the state's constitution in 1907. Oklahoma Department of Labor was the first government agency in the state of Oklahoma, and so that just completely blew my mind.
Yeah, it's unbelievable the stuff you uncover once you start looking at it, because I kept getting different names on who's the first mayor of Oklahoma City. And so trying to figure out why, and turns out, well, we had these two rival governments, with one group voted on a city council and mayor at 3:00, and the other group voted at 4:00 on who's going to have a city charter and all this. And then, of course, 6 months down the line, we get a whole nother election.
Yeah, was that before or after we stole the state steel from Guthrie?
So that would have been well before, yeah. Which
okay.
Here in Oklahoma City, we talk about there was a legitimate election, 1911. We had Oklahoma City, Shawnee, and Guthrie all up for vote, and everybody in the state at that time voted. The steel part comes from Guthrie for sure, which there's lots of legends about actually stealing the steel seal out of the floor and all this stuff, which no, it was just the stamp that you do on official documents, which was smuggled out in the laundry. So there was some shenanigans going on, which that legitimate election did have its polling results released to the newspapers before the polls actually closed.
Yeah.
So don't know how trustworthy those numbers were exactly.
When are we ever able to trust the numbers?
That's true. Yeah.
Has anything changed since then?
Betsy, when you say shenanigans, it makes me think of the joke, if you let them shenan once, they're going to shenan again.
Well, she goes shenan again. Yes. That's a good joke. Jeff, what are some of the other haunted places you've been to in Oklahoma? Some of the big names like Stone Lion Inn. Have you been there?
Mm-hmm. So Stone Lion Inn, we've been there a couple of times doing some podcasting, as well as initially doing the Haunted Guthrie book, and had some interesting things go on there. The little girl ghost is supposed to be there, as well as a couple of others, and she's famous for stealing glasses and money from people. Which, when we were doing the podcast for Tales Unveiled, we checked out the third floor where she's supposed to hang out most of the time. And in her closet up there on the north end, there was all this coins piled up. Nickels, quarters, dimes, like $30 worth of change, just all piled up, which is famous ghost lore, right? Lots of pubs and stuff talk about piles of change and things just start showing up, which is a pretty cool ghost to have, right? If you're going to be haunted, at least one that pays rent.
Exactly.
So saw that in the closet, and I figured, okay, well, Becky Luker, the lady who owns it, she's probably heard about the ghost folklore, and she's staging this for us. So that's pretty cool. And mentioned it to her, and she said, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "All the coins up in the closet." And she said, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. If that's hers, then I'm leaving it alone."
Probably a good idea.
Which is pretty good, yeah. And then we also got the door locked on us. This is pretty famous for having doors locked here and there. The housekeeper's been locked. She lost count of how many times.
Oh boy.
But Dennis and I came through the front door. He had all this equipment with him in his hands, so his hands were full. Went through. I closed the door behind him, and he went on to the kitchen. I was standing in the front lobby. I was just looking at some of the memorabilia and history clippings she has on the wall. And one of the other podcasters coming in behind us, so knocked on the door, and it'd been 60, 90 seconds. And so I said, hey, come in. And the door rattled, and then they knocked again. So I went over, and the deadbolt had been turned. So, yeah, which was frustrating, because if I had just turned my head another 45 degrees, I would have seen it, but I missed my shot.
So you missed it by that much.
Yes.
That's right.
You have a couple of almost experiences there, like with the face in the window, the turning of the lock.
Jeff, can you tell us a bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so Tales Unveiled. I had been doing the tour for a while, and Dennis Spielman's a podcaster and filmmaker here in Norman, and he had this idea for a narrative podcast. So we have this fictional storyline of a professor and a filmmaker going through Oklahoma. So not a big stretch for us. But we were finding out all these stories, and we do interviews and things as these characters and so forth. So actual stories just connected with this fictional storyline.
Right on.
And ran for 3 seasons and had all kinds of fun investigations and stuff. So I learned a whole lot, which is always a good thing for more stories being gathered together. So my character, the professor, always talked about his notebook and the secrets and stuff inside, which I've got a whole stack of notebooks of all the different rumors and things that I hear. And as soon as I get, I like to say 2 leads from independent sources, then we got something going on.
And say the name of the podcast again, because I definitely want to go check that out.
Yep, Tales Unveiled.
Nice. I suspect that there are several of our listeners who are definitely going to want to check that out, because that sounds like a lot of fun. There's one called Bridgewater that's kind of got a sort of a similar bent, where you have a professor who's a folklorist, and I really liked that one, and so I suspect I'll really like yours too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so check it out. Oh, and that brings me back to the Moore Lindsay house with all these things that could be this, could be that. Like maybe I subconsciously locked the door behind me. I wouldn't believe that, because I don't have that kind of lock on my door. Or maybe it was another sound that happened in this place, or all these different things. So back at the Moore Lindsay house, I had to ghost tour that night that they were doing the investigation. So they said, oh, come in late, just send us a text so we don't get a knock at the door and everybody starts screaming. And I went in, and they said, oh, we're on break. It's great. Like, we were having all this activity, and we've gotten these photos and this conversations going on and stuff. And then when I got there, everything just dropped off. Like, none of the readers were doing anything serious. It was just quiet. And they were trying to, get some communication going on and things. And then finally the ghost radio, which, famously does little clips and you have to kind of put them together, goes completely and says, cast out the writer.
Oh my gosh. So
I thought, okay, well, that maybe that's me. And I said, oh, I'm so tired tonight, and yawned and things. So I'm going to head home. And they said, oh, thanks for coming by. And so I headed home, and of course the next day sent a thank you note, and hope everything else went great. And they said, oh, you should have stayed around. Everything afterward was going wild. We had all this other conversations and things, which believe her name is Augusta, but the main ghost at the house, kind of the grandniece of the original builder, and lived in the building for a little while and had connections. And it's apparently a very upright lady, so very prim and proper. And even the museum director told me, like, she doesn't like being upstairs after dark. She just gets the sensation of somebody glaring at her, being like, family only upstairs after dark.
Wow.
Like all that. So I guess she didn't want me airing any dirty laundry for the ghosts at the house. So I headed out. And
she was a little book shy. Wow.
I think that should be a bumper sticker. Cast out the writer.
No.
It would be an inside joke.
Yeah.
Jeff, why don't you share with our listeners where they can find you and learn more about you?
Sure, you can check me out at www.jeffprovine.com. That's Provine. Got links to my books there, as well as links to the ghost tours scheduled up. So I try to do one in Norman and one in Oklahoma City every month through March through November.
Fantastic.
It's pretty warm out.
Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on the show and sharing all your amazing stories and explaining what makes you unfreaking believable. I'd also like to thank my lovely co-host, my unfraidy ladies. And listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible.
And you can join our Unfreaking Believable Facebook group and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at UFB Podcast. You can also join us on Patreon for exclusive content and other perks for as little as $1 a month. What a bargain for you. That's less than a Big Mac at McDonald's. In fact, that's less than the ketchup on a Big Mac at McDonald's.
Anymore, yeah.
It's less than a Big Mac. We like that. And you can also visit our website at www.ufbpodcast.com. And if you have an unfreaking believable story, reach out to us at ufbpodcast@gmail.com because we'd like to hear your story too.
Betsy, you want to send us out with our quote of the day?
Yes, our quote of the day comes today from J.M. Barrie. It says, "A house is never still in darkness to those who listen intently. There is a whispering in distant chambers. An unearthly hand presses the snib of the window. The latch rises. Ghosts were created when the first men woke in the night."
I love J.M. Barrie. That's fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Unfreaking Believable podcast. And remember, as you go out into the world this week, don't just be awesome.
Be unfreaking believable.
See you all next time.